Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it to the last video of my NFL division preview series for 2025, and we are talking today about the NFC East, a division that has not had a repeat winner since 2004-2005 season, but also a division that is having the reigning Super Bowl champions in it, as well as a team that was just in the NFC Championship. So it's safe to say that, yeah, this division is going to be pretty good in 2025. But before 2025, let's talk 2024. The Philadelphia Eagles won this division, winning 14 games and, of course, winning the Super Bowl. The Washington Commanders finished the season on a 5-game win streak to go to 12-5, and they did get to the NFC Championship. The Cowboys, with a Dak injury, finished 7-10, and the Giants 3-14, landing themselves Abdul Carter. There's no doubt in my mind that the NFC East very well could be the NFC Beast this year, with Philly, Washington, that, Giants defensive line, and Dak back healthy for the Cowboys. There are going to be some fun games in this division, but who comes out on top? Let's talk about it. Finishing in 4th place in the division with a 3-14 record, missing out on the playoffs, I have the New York Giants. Now, I got to keep it 1,000 with you New York Giants fans. I actually think that your team is better than last year and does have a bright future. The problem is you absolutely got railed by the NFL schedule gods this year. I mean, you play these NFC East teams 6 times as it is, but then you also get matched up with the NFC North and the AFC West. It is no doubt in my mind the toughest schedule in football belonging to the New York Giants. And for that reason, I have the record staying the same. But truthfully, I think you might have a fringe top 10 defense and some real pieces on offense to be excited about. When it comes to the Giants offense in 2025, there might seriously be more questions than answers. The quarterback room, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, Tommy DeVito. Which one of those guys gets more starts than the rest? Dayball came out and announced that Russ is the starter. In terms of pure talent, as of right now, I'd actually take Jameis Winston. But in terms of upside, Jackson Dart, the guy that you traded back up into the first round to get. However, with how tough this schedule is Jackson Dart a guy that you want to throw out there in this spot? I'm just not sure about it. There's a lot of question marks when it comes to the Giants quarterback position, and I'm not one of those guys that thinks Dart can't be a guy in the NFL. I think he actually does have some tools that could translate well. Arm talent and arm size. He's just overall a good size for a quarterback and more mobile than you think. The football IQ and decision making needs some work, but we've seen Brian Daboll make that work with a quarterback before. Josh Allen, ring a bell to anyone? The running back room, again, more questions than answers. Tyrone Tracy, is he the lead back right now? It seems that way in training camp, but you drafted Cam Scatterboo in roughly the same spot you got Tracy. Scatterboo may have higher upside, but he's dealing with a hamstring injury. And then veteran Devin Singletary is still in this backfield. Again, more question marks than answers. And for that, I don't even know who you would want to be the running back. I think many Giants fans will say Scatterboo just because he's most recently the guy we've seen flourish at a high level because of what he did at Arizona State. But still, more question marks than answers. Now, what is not a question mark is Malik Neighbors, man. This guy has quickly become one of the best wide receivers in football. I think he's for sure a top 10 guy. And if they just let Jameis play all year, I think he could seriously get into top 5 conversations. Look at what Jerry Jeudy did with some of Jameis Winston last year. He was top 5 in receiving yards. You're telling me Malik Neighbors can absolutely pop off this year? If Jameis was the guy, he absolutely would crush. And Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, those guys are wide receiver 2s to 3s, but listen, you have Malik Neighbors, you have the stud. That is a fine wide receiver room. Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger is a decent tight end room. Andrew Thomas, obviously, in that old line. And then some guys that it's like, maybe I believe in them, maybe we don't. New York should really build up the offensive line, and I think they're going to have another top-tier pick in the draft this year, so maybe they believe in Dart and they draft him a good offensive line to go with already some pretty solid weapons. Now, the defense is the story of this team because, like I said, I think it is a fringe, if not top 10 defensive unit in football, and it starts with what may be the best defensive front in the league. Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, you just drafted an Abdul Carter on that defensive line. Absolutely disgusting. Kayvon Thibodeau, Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, like that front 7 for the New York Giants is going to absolutely wreck games. And the Dallas Cowboys having injuries on their offensive line, they might be the team that injures Dak this year. I'm really saying that truthfully. the pressure that they're going to get versus the Cowboys when I believe they play in week 2 is going to be ridiculous. And I think the Giants might actually win that football game. The more that I talk about it, the more I talk myself into it. This defense alone is going to keep the Giants in some really close football games, probably closer than they should be because of that offense. Now, I don't think it's going to make their games necessarily high action, but I think there's going to be plenty of 20 to 14 losses on the Giants schedule, which is saying something in the modern day NFL. You also brought in Paulson Adebo, Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland brought in, Deontay Banks, Drew Phillips, like top to bottom. This is a really, really solid defense and one of the more underrated units in the NFL today. All in all, I do think that the New York Giants are laying a good foundation for a team of the future, and Brian Daboll is still a head coach that I believe in. I know that there's some people that will tell you that it's time to get Daboll out of there, even if they have another 3-14 season. I truthfully don't think it's at the feet of Daboll. I think you go one more year with this defense, develop the offense, get Dart out of there as a starter next year, and improve the offensive line, and the New York Giants could seriously be right back to a playoff team. And hell, the way that the NFC East is with flip-floppy division winners, maybe they win the whole division in 2026. Finishing in third place with a 7-10 record, I have the Dallas Cowboys missing out on the NFL playoffs. For me, Dallas is kind of the polar opposite of the New York Giants. I feel good about their offense and I don't feel good about their defense, and I don't really like their coaching staff. It really is polar opposites. But at the end of the day, I have them winning 7 football games because I just do think that that offense in an offense-driven league is going to be enough to get a lot more wins than the New York Giants are going to be capable of. And obviously at their ceiling, we have seen in recent years the Dallas Cowboys can win this game, win 12 games, and be a Super Bowl favorite pushing outside of the playoffs. But I just don't see it this year with some of the losses they had on the defensive side of the ball and the coaching staff that they have, and Jerry Jones and whatever Jerry Jones does. When I look at the offense, Dak Prescott obviously is the biggest question mark for this team. How healthy could he stay? When Dak stays healthy, the Cowboys have a top 10 to 5 offense in football. Dak's a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, and they ultimately make the playoffs. When Dak gets hurt, we saw what we saw last year. And ultimately, Dak's mobility with another ankle injury has to be even further gone. So Dak is pretty much going to be designated to being a pocket passer quarterback in my estimation. And with, limiting his mobility, making him solely rely on judgment from in the pocket and executing throws, I do think it limits some of their offense. And then when you look at their running game, I just don't think it's a two-dimensional offense. Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jadon Blue is banged up, and Deuce Vaughn, that just simply doesn't do it for me from a running game perspective. I think that this is a one-dimensional offense, and don't get me wrong, Dak could sling the rock, and CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Jalen Tolbert, Jake Ferguson, Jonathan Mingo, Cavonte Turpin, like Dallas has enough pass catchers to fuel a very efficient passing game offense. And the offensive line, when healthy, can get there. Are Gutton and Smith on that left side of the line going to be ready to go for week 1? I don't know. You still have Cooper Bebe and Tyler Booker's coming in as a rookie looking to replace Zach Martin, and you still have Terrence Steele. Like, it's an okay offensive line, but like I said, there's question marks on health. How does Booker follow up to Zach Martin? And with all the question marks on the offensive line and Dak's now limited mobility and the fact that he just kind of is an injury risk at this point, I would be shocked if we saw Dak play a full 17 this year. I'm not sitting here telling you that I think Dak's going to suffer a season-ending injury like last year, but my guess is he gets banged up and missed some time, and really the Cowboys cannot afford Dak Prescott or this offense to skip a beat at any point in this season, because if they have Joe Milton out there, don't get me wrong, I like Joe Milton, but without a real run game, the offense is likely going to sputter. The Cowboys are very Dak, CeeDee, and Pickens reliant this year. We'll see how it goes. You look at this defense, and we have to start with the question mark that is Micah Parsons. I pushed this video off as long as I could. I'm recording it August 14th, and we'll see. But apparently, there's still been no communication between Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons' agent. I don't know if I'm supposed to believe that a deal is going to get done at this point in time, but Micah could hold out realistically week 1. It is possible. Jerry even said that it's possible that Micah doesn't play week 1 because he's holding in and he wouldn't be ready. Those are valuable games. You play Philadelphia week 1. That's a division game. Micah having to get ramped up and not being his full self. We saw Nick Bosa do this a couple of years ago. And even though he got the contract right before the start of the season, he just wasn't the same for the first half of the year because he wasn't practicing and he wasn't in training camp. So even if you get Micah Parsons, are you getting the Micah Parsons that we saw all of last year? I'm not sure. Mozzie Smith kind of feels like he might be a bust. Odighizowa actually really solid. Same with Nealand. But in that secondary, Trayvon Diggs, he's an injury risk. Deron Bland had the one good season, but I think that was overrated. Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, it's fine. The linebacking core with Kenneth Murray doesn't really do anything to me. Overshown's nice, but again, he's a guy who is hurt right now. The defense is already banged up, and even at its full strength for Dallas, I don't think it's a top 15 unit in football. Like I said, Dallas's defense with and without Micah Parsons is a disaster. With Micah Parsons, depending on how late this gets pushed, he's not going to be his full self. And this Cowboys defense is going to be desperately relying on Micah Parsons to being a superstar if they're going to be just average. Ultimately, with all these question marks in Dallas, knowing how Jerry Jones operates, Micah Parsons' situation, Dak's health, I just can't predict this team to bounce back at this point in time. I think that we saw the Cowboys window open and close at the end of the 2023 season when they lost to the Green Bay Packers. I think Dak Prescott in this team will never be a Super Bowl contending team as long as Dak is under that contract again. Sorry, that's just how I feel at this point in time. The Dallas Cowboys finished 7-10 and third in this division. Finishing with a 10-7 record, but missing the playoffs, I have the Washington Commanders. And before we hop into the Commanders' 10-7 season that still does see them missing the playoffs in the NFC, I want to remind you guys to hit that subscribe button. If you love the NFL, I got predictions videos, tier lists, instant game reactions, a whole ton of NFL content on the channel. This can be your hub for NFL videos. Hit that subscribe button. Let's talk Commanders football. So yeah, I'm at a weird spot with the Commanders where I have them winning double-digit games in my predictions, but I also have them missing the playoffs because I think the NFC has a lot of really good teams. If you watched my NFC North video, you saw that the Bears were the 7 seed in at 10-7, and that's because I just think that the Bears beat the Commanders when they face off this year. You flip-flop that matchup, and all of a sudden the Bears are out of the playoffs and the Commanders are in with 11 wins. It really is just that simple of a switch. So why do I think that the Commanders are regressing from 12 wins to 10? Because the NFL is just not linear, man. We did this with the Houston Texans. We did this with the Green Bay Packers, where we assumed coming into next year, both of those teams were going to take leaps. But really, they just kind of stayed stagnant. If the Washington Commanders stay stagnant, but with a better, schedule in terms of who they're facing, they do face the NFC North, they do face the AFC West, and then they are playing a second place schedule along with teams having an offseason to study Jaden Daniels and get tape on him. I do think that that could be enough for 1 to 2 more losses, let alone the fact that we have to factor in, is Cliff Kingsbury going to hold up as an offensive coordinator in year 2? Usually the NFL defenses have figured out Cliff Kingsbury by year 2. We saw that in Arizona, and I'm not saying that Jaden Daniels is Kyler Murray. Clearly, I have this team winning double-digit games, but it's certainly something that concerns me. When you talk about this offense, we have to start with obviously Jaden Daniels, who absolutely blew everybody away his rookie season. He came in and absolutely dominated from day one. It was the clearest cut rookie of the year I've seen in a long time. He had the greatest rookie quarterback season of ever and took Washington all the way from the number 2 pick to the NFC Championship. There's no denying at this point in time how good Jaden Daniels is. He's firmly in my top 10 quarterbacks, and I would, venture to say if he repeats what he did last year or this year, you could move him into a consensus top 5 quarterback potentially. We have to see what everybody else does, obviously. But my point being, Jaden Daniels has everything you want. The arm talent is there. The arm strength is there. He throws a beautiful deep ball. The IQ is there. The ability to run a system, the mobility, everything you want in a quarterback is there with Jaden Daniels. His slender frame, I guess it makes him, more of an injury risk, but the way we protect the quarterbacks in today's game, that risk has gone down substantially from where it was 10 years ago. Jaden Daniels may be the perfect modern day NFL quarterback. I just want to see more of it before I firmly push him up. The running back room is solid too. Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, the rookie that they drafted that's making waves, it's pretty solid. We saw obviously the Robinson-Eckler pairing do well last year. Eckler in pass catching situations was very efficient before he got hurt, and Brian Robinson's a solid goal line back. I do have my concerns regarding this Terry McLaurin situation, truthfully, because I do think that they're ultimately going to pay him and they should have already paid him. But like I mentioned with Micah Parsons, you have a guy that's been sitting on the sidelines for most of training camp, by the time the season starts, he's usually not 100% ready to go, caught up to speed, and that makes him liable for a slower start and soft tissue injuries. And the Commanders can't afford Terry McLaurin to not be Terry McLaurin. This receiver room outside of him does worry me. Deebo Samuel, when he plays and he's on, he's great, but how often are you going to get him? Noah Brown, KJ Osborne, Luke McCaffrey, Michael Gallup. Like in 2025, these are just not guys that I want to depend on. Zach Ertz even is up there in age in the tight end room. It's just they are one Terry McLaurin injury not playing away from having the worst weapons room in this division. And I do think that that really does matter when you are trying to push to be a playoff team and a Super Bowl contender. Now, they did make some upgrades to the offensive line. Laremy Tunsil, Josh Connerly in the draft. You have Tyler Biatz at the center position. Sam Cosmi still at right guard. Like, this is a good offensive line. And I do like the fact that the Commanders didn't just go all in necessarily on last year, but said, we have the franchise guy, let's build around him, let's protect him, and value that offensive line. I just wish if the plan wasn't to pay Terry McLaurin, that they also made it a point to draft a receiver that they could believe in. But the Commanders' future obviously is very, very bright on the offensive side of the ball, with or without Cliff Kingsbury being efficient, just because of the talent of Jaden Daniels and the offensive line that they built. You get to the defensive side of the ball, and I do have some true worries here, if I'm being honest. I think this defense is what could stop the Commanders from being true Super Bowl contenders. Their pass rush, they brought in Javon Kinlaw, which I don't like. They signed Von Miller, who wasn't super effective last year in Buffalo. And then it's just kind of a bunch of guys. I guess I like Daron Payne and Dorrance Armstrong, but these aren't elite edge rushers, and these aren't guys that against the better offensive lines in football are going to make a real impact at pressuring the quarterback. You go back to the NFC Championship versus Philadelphia. What did they do to close the gap? To me, I don't think they did enough to close the gap. Philly hung 50 points on them in that game, and their defense did not get much better, if I got to be honest. I still don't see this team having a strong ability to stop the run. Despite Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner being good, at the end of the day, eventually age is going to catch up to Bobby Wagner, and I'm not saying I'm betting on it to be this year, but it could be this year, and I do like Frankie Louvu, so, they have a solid linebacking core. At the cornerback position, they draft Trey Amos. They have Mike Sanders still, which I do think is really nice. Marshawn Lattimore's on this team, but he's just another guy that can't stay healthy. I like Quan Martin, but he's just kind of a replacement for Jeremy Chin. Ultimately, they are asking Dan Quinn to elevate this defense, which he did do last year. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but when we get to these high stakes playoff games, you have to wonder if Detroit's defense was healthy, would the Commanders have been in an NFC Championship? And then once they got to the NFC Championship, they clearly weren't at the level of a Super Bowl team. I don't think they would have beaten the Rams either, truthfully, and I don't think that this defense is talented enough to close the gap on those elite teams. While it may have sounded like I was being a bit negative there, I do want to acknowledge the Commanders have one of the brightest futures in the NFL and in the NFC. Simply put, Jaden Daniels, that offensive line, and Dan Quinn at head coach, I think is all hits, and ultimately those are the three most important parts of a team. I just think that they have some cleaning up to do around the edges in terms of getting some more additional talent on this defense and getting a little bit better of a weapons room. So I do have the Commanders regressing a little bit with a higher strength of schedule, more film out, and my question marks on Cliff Kingsbury in this defense, but the future is still bright for the Commanders. I don't think Jaden Daniels was a one-hit wonder by any means. And then finishing first in the NFC East, in the NFC overall, I have the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles at a 12-5 record. When it comes to selling you on the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think that there's a lot of work that I have to do here. This team just won the Super Bowl in dominant fashion. We obviously all know how good they are, but I think the most important thing to note was how much of their talent they actually did retain. The entire starting offense is still running it back this year. The defense, you still have a lot of really young pieces that are developing, and yeah, they did lose some veteran pieces, but ultimately this team did stay together, which reminds me a lot of the 2013-2014 Seattle Seahawks, where they went to back-to-back Super Bowls. The Philadelphia Eagles feel like along those realms to me. I think we could be looking at a team that eventually is looked back as the best team of the 2020s, that 2023, 2024, 2025 run, the 2024, 2025, 2025, 2026, Philadelphia Eagles. Starting talking about the offense, we could start with Jalen Hurts. We could have a sit here and have a quarterback discussion that's the length of an entire video. To me, he's a top 5 quarterback at the position. He has shown that in the big spots in the Super Bowl when he needed to be the guy that was orchestrating the offense because KC sold out against the run and Saquon Barkley, that he could do that. In In that Super Bowl, he had 3 touchdowns, more rushing yards than Saquon Barkley, and absolutely picked apart the Kansas City Chiefs defense. He is a solid 12 to 18 rushing touchdowns a year. You could say, oh, it's the tush push that. Nobody else is doing it as efficiently as Jalen Hurts, and he's gone from Jason Kelce to Cam Jurgens. Yes, the offensive line is great, and they are a huge part of it, but so is the fact that Jalen Hurts could squat 600 fucking pounds. The Jalen Hurts hate and discourse has gone too far, but we're not going to sit here and talk about it. They have the best running back in football, Saquon Barkley, who was just so dominant last year. Could have broke, honestly, the NFL record for rushing yards if he had played that 18th game. I know it wasn't set with an 18th game, so he was even. At the end of the day, it was still one of the 10 greatest running back seasons of all time. Saquon is still an absolute beast. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, perhaps the best wide receiver duo in football. Jahan Dotson is still solid. Johnny Wilson's got some size, so a decent wide receiver room. Dallas Goedert is a really, really underrated tight end. And in my estimation, they still have the best offensive line in football. Mailata, Dickerson, Jurgens, Steen, Lane Johnson. Dickerson gonna miss some time to open up the year, I think, but ultimately, for the big moments, this team's offensive line, running game, and Jalen Hurts' efficiency are going to carry this offense the same way that it did last year. And when you look at the defense, there was some turnover, especially on that defensive line, losing guys like Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, you lose Slay, you lose Isaiah Rodgers. Like, there were pieces that left this team, but I think Philly always does a great job at turnover on the defensive line. You still have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith. You bring now up Amoro Ojomo, you have a Josh Uche, you have an Azeez Ojulari, you drafted a Ty Robinson, the linebacker room, Zach Bond, you drafted Jahad Campbell, you'll have Nakobe Dean back. Like, this front seven is still really, really high level. The secondary is the part where I think if there was going to be a unit that stopped this team from repeating as Super Bowl champions, it would be the secondary. You obviously still have Quinyon Mitchell, Reed Blankenship, and Cooper DeJean, but now there is turnover at the other safety spot opposite Blankenship. Is it going to be Sidney Brown? Is it going to be second-round pick Andrew Makuba? I don't know. In the secondary cornerback spot, is it Adoree Jackson? Is it Keely Ringo? Is it Jacorian Bennett? I don't know. Those are the two spots where you look at it and you say, what would stop the Eagles from repeating as Super Bowl champions? Could it be one of those two spots? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, this defense is still loaded and still top 5 in football. Again, there's not too much to say about a defending champion Super Bowl team that you don't already know. My only point on this is I do think the Eagles have the makings to be a repeat champion. Again, they kept their offense, they kept most of their defense. It's a young team, it's a growing team, and it's a team that's worth being excited about in 2025. To recap my NFC East standings, I have the Philadelphia Eagles being the only team to make the playoffs at a 12-5 record. I have the Commanders finishing as the 8 seed, 10-7, just missing out. Dallas finishes at 7-10, and the Giants 3-14. The NFC East is not necessarily the NFC beast this year, but when you factor in what the Commanders can do if they add just some more talent next offseason and the Giants potentially progressing forward, there could be 3 really solid teams in this division when it's all said and done in 2026. I do think Dallas is headed on a downward trajectory, but hey, maybe they got something in the tank that I don't know about. These were, of course, my NFC East predictions. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. All division predictions are now live on the channel. If you want to check out any of those videos, be my guest. If you love the NFL, hit that subscribe button. I will catch you next time. Peace.